The envelope hit the white tablecloth with a soft thud. $50,000 in unmarked bills. Lucas Hale didn't flinch. He simply shook his head, adjusted the tray balanced on his forearm, and turned away from the most powerful woman in the city. Adrienne Cole's jaw tightened. No one refused her offers. But as Lucas reached for the wine bottle, his sleeve pulled back just enough to reveal a thin scar along his wrist. Adrienne's breath caught. She knew that scar. She knew that face. The waiter carrying Pinot Noir to table 7 wasn't just anyone. He was the ghost who'd saved her empire, then vanished into thin air. If you want to see how far a man can fall and still keep his dignity, stay with me until the very end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Let's begin. The dining room at Marchand's was all soft lighting and muted conversation, the kind of place where deals worth millions got sealed over seared scallops and aged whiskey. Lucas moved through it like a shadow, professional, invisible, exactly the way he'd trained himself to be over the past 3 years. He refilled water glasses without interrupting conversations, cleared plates without scraping china, smiled politely when spoken to, but never inserted himself into the moment. It was a Tuesday night, which meant the usual crowd. Venture capitalists pretending to be modest, tech executives pretending to be visionary, and the occasional old money family pretending they still mattered. Lucas had learned to read them all. The way they ordered told him everything: who was trying to impress, who actually had taste, who was nervous, who was in control. Table 12 was different tonight. Adrienne Cole sat alone near the window, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable. She wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Lucas made in 2 months, and she had the kind of stillness that came from genuine confidence rather than performance. Her assistant had called ahead. Prime table, wine pairing, absolute discretion. Lucas had served her type 100 times before. CEOs, founders, board members. People who moved through the world like they owned the oxygen. But Adrienne kept watching him. Not in the way diners usually did, checking to see if their order was coming or silently judging the service. She tracked his movements with an intensity that felt deliberate, like she was solving a puzzle only she could see. Lucas ignored it. He'd gotten good at being ignored, and even better at ignoring back. When he approached to take her order, she didn't look at the menu. "The halibut," she said, "and I'd like to speak with the sommelier about the pairing." "Of course." Lucas nodded and turned to go. "Wait." He paused, professional smile still in place. "Yes, ma'am?" Adrienne leaned back slightly, eyes narrowing. "Have we met before?" "I don't believe so." "You're certain?" "I'm certain I'd remember, ma'am." It wasn't entirely a lie. He did remember. But that version of Lucas Hale, the one who'd sat across boardroom tables from people like Adrienne Cole, didn't exist anymore. That man had been buried under 3 years of silence, single fatherhood, and the kind of exhaustion that came from rebuilding a life from rubble. Adrienne studied him for another beat, then waved him off. "Never mind. The wine, please." Lucas escaped to the kitchen, shoulders tight. He told himself it was nothing. Rich people always thought they knew you from somewhere. Charity galas, country clubs, some assistant's cousin's wedding. It didn't mean anything, but his hands were shaking when he poured her wine. The rest of the evening passed without incident until dessert service. Lucas was clearing table 9 when he saw Adrienne's assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Miriam, approach with a leather portfolio. She set it beside Adrienne's plate, whispered something, then stepped back with her hands folded. Adrienne opened the portfolio, scanned whatever was inside, and frowned. Lucas turned away, focusing on his work, not his business, not his world anymore. 10 minutes later, Miriam flagged him down. "Ms. Cole would like to speak with you privately," she said, "after your shift." "I'm afraid that's not possible," Lucas replied smoothly. "I have another commitment." Miriam's expression didn't change. "She's prepared to compensate you for your time." "I appreciate the offer, but I really can't." "She insists." Lucas met her eyes. "Then she'll be disappointed." He walked away before Miriam could respond. His shift ended in 20 minutes. If he moved quickly, he could be out the door before Adrienne finished her espresso. But when he pushed through the staff exit into the alley, Adrienne was already there. She stood beside a black town car, arms crossed, looking entirely unbothered by the smell of garbage and grease that clung to the air. The driver, a broad-shouldered man with the alert posture of private security, waited by the open door. "Mr. Hale," Adrian said. Not a question, a statement. Lucas stopped walking. For a moment, he considered just turning around, heading back inside, pretending he hadn't heard. But that would only confirm what she clearly already knew. "It's late," he said carefully. "I need to get home." "I won't take much of your time." Adrian stepped forward, heels clicking against the wet pavement. "I just want to understand why a man with your background is working in a restaurant. People work in restaurants. Not people who used to run strategic operations for Dalton and Cross." The name hit him like a fist to the sternum. Lucas forced himself to keep breathing, keep his expression neutral. "I think you have me confused with someone else." "I don't." Adrian pulled a slim envelope from her coat pocket and held it out. 5 years ago, you were the lead strategist on the Meridian acquisition. You identified the flaw in their accounting structure that everyone else missed, saved the deal. Saved my company, actually. We were the secondary buyer. I was VP of operations at the time. I remember reading your analysis and thinking, this person sees 3 moves ahead. Lucas didn't take the envelope. "That was a long time ago." 3 years ago, you were accused of tanking the Silver Lake merger. Internal documents surfaced, showing you'd recommended a withdrawal strategy that cost Dalton and Cross $200 million and torpedoed their relationship with one of their largest clients. You were terminated, blacklisted, and effectively erased from the industry. Adrian's voice was clinical, detached. "Except I don't think you did it. What I did or didn't do isn't your concern." "You're right, it's not." Adrian tapped the envelope against her palm. "But I'm making it my concern, because 6 months ago, I bought Dalton and Cross, which means I now own the company that destroyed you, and I've spent the last 3 weeks reviewing every file, every email, every piece of documentation related to Silver Lake." She paused. "You were set up." Lucas felt something crack open in his chest, something he'd kept locked down for so long he'd almost convinced himself it didn't exist anymore. Anger, grief, the jagged, useless need for someone to finally say it out loud. But he couldn't afford to feel any of it. "I appreciate you looking into it," he said quietly. "But I've moved on." "Have you?" Adrian gestured to the alley, the restaurant, the life he'd constructed out of necessity. "Because it doesn't look like you've moved on. It looks like you've buried yourself." "I have a son." The words came out harder than he intended. "I have responsibilities. I don't have the luxury of fighting battles I already lost." Adrian's expression shifted, something almost like respect flickering across her face. "Then let me fight them for you." She opened the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. Lucas didn't need to read it to know what it was. He could see the letterhead from where he stood. Coal Industries. Official reinstatement offer. 6 figures, maybe 7. Corner office. Full rehabilitation of his professional reputation. Everything he'd lost, handed back to him on a silver platter. "Why?" he asked. "Because you're brilliant," Adrian said simply. "And because I don't like seeing talent go to waste." Lucas looked at the paper, then at Adrian, then at the town car idling behind her. He thought about his son, asleep in their cramped apartment 6 blocks away. He thought about the scar on his wrist, the one he'd gotten the night he'd finally stopped checking his phone every 5 minutes, hoping someone, anyone, would believe him. He thought about the 3 years he'd spent learning to be small, to be invisible, to ask for nothing because nothing was all he'd ever get. Then he shook his head. "I can't." Adrian blinked. "Excuse me?" "I said I can't." Lucas stepped back, putting distance between himself and the offer. "I appreciate what you're trying to do. I do. But I'm not interested." "You're turning down a 7-figure salary?" "I'm turning down the chance to step back into a world that chewed me up and spit me out. I did that once. I'm not doing it again. Even if I clear your name?" "Even then." For the first time since the conversation started, Adrian looked genuinely surprised. She lowered the paper, studying him with the same intensity she'd had in the restaurant. "You're serious?" "I'm serious. You'd rather serve wine than rebuild your career." "I'd rather be home when my son wakes up from a nightmare," Lucas said. "I'd rather know exactly who I am when I look in the mirror. I'd rather be broke and clean than rich and compromised." He met her eyes. So yeah, I'd rather serve wine. Adrienne was quiet for a long moment. Then she folded the paper and slid it back into the envelope. You're either the most principled man I've ever met, she said slowly, or the most stubborn. Probably both. She almost smiled. If you change your mind, I won't. The offer stands. Adrienne handed him the envelope anyway, just in case. Lucas hesitated, then took it. Not because he planned to use it, but because refusing felt like it would drag the conversation out longer than necessary. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Adrienne turned toward the car, then paused. One more thing. Yeah? That scar on your wrist. How'd you get it? Lucas pulled his sleeve down. Accident. Accident, Adrienne repeated, like she was testing the word. Right. She slid into the car without another word, and the driver closed the door behind her. Lucas watched the taillights disappear around the corner, then stuffed the envelope into his jacket pocket and started walking. Push. The apartment was dark when he got home. Lucas locked the door behind him, kicked off his shoes, and moved quietly through the narrow hallway to his son's room. The door was cracked open, just the way Ethan liked it. Enough light from the kitchen to keep the shadows from getting too close, but not enough to keep him awake. Ethan was sprawled across the twin bed, one arm flung over his head, his breathing deep and even. He was 7 now, all elbows and knees and endless questions. He had Lucas's dark hair and his mother's stubborn chin, and he was the only reason Lucas had survived the last 3 years intact. Lucas pulled the blanket up over Ethan's shoulders, then sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, just watching him sleep. He thought about Adrienne's offer. He thought about the life he used to have. The late nights, the high-stakes meetings, the adrenaline rush of solving problems no one else could see. He'd been good at it, better than good. He'd been exceptional. But he'd also been alone. And he'd been arrogant enough to think that excellence was the same as safety. That if he was smart enough, valuable enough, indispensable enough, no one would ever be able to touch him. He'd been wrong. The people who'd framed him hadn't cared how brilliant he was. They'd cared that he was in the way, and they'd removed him with the kind of efficiency he used to admire. Cold, clinical, permanent. It had taken him 6 months to stop being angry, another year to stop being bitter, and the last year and a half to build something that felt like peace. He wasn't about to throw that away. Lucas stood, tucked the blanket in one more time, and left the room. In the kitchen, he pulled the envelope from his pocket and tossed it onto the counter. He'd shred it in the morning, or maybe he'd just throw it away. Either way, it didn't matter. He wasn't going back. 3 days later, Adrienne showed up at the restaurant again. This time she didn't sit at a table. She walked straight into the kitchen during the dinner rush, bypassing the hostess and the manager and every single health code regulation about unauthorized personnel in food prep areas. Lucas looked up from the dessert station where he was plating crème brûlée and found her standing 3 feet away, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "You can't be back here," he said. "I own a restaurant," Adrienne replied. "2, actually. I know the rules. I'm choosing to ignore them. What do you want?" "I want to know why you're so determined to waste your life." Lucas set down the torch he'd been using and met her eyes. "I'm not wasting anything." "You're a waiter, Lucas, and you're a CEO who just walked into a commercial kitchen without washing her hands. We all make choices." Adrienne's mouth twitched, almost a smile, but not quite. "Fair point." She glanced around the kitchen, taking in the organized chaos, the line cook shouting orders, the expediter barking instructions. "How much do you make here? 40,000 a year? 50 with tips? That's none of your business. I'm offering you 10 times that, maybe 15 depending on performance. Full benefits, equity options, your own team." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I'm offering you a chance to matter again." "I already matter," Lucas said quietly, "to the person who actually needs me. Your son." "Yeah, my son." Adrienne studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "You really mean it, don't you? You're actually okay with this?" "I'm more than okay with it. I chose it." "Why?" "Because the last time I played the game you're asking me to play, I lost everything that actually mattered. My reputation, my career, my ability to trust anyone. I spent 2 years fighting to prove I wasn't the person they said I was. And you know what I learned? Lucas met her eyes. It didn't matter. Guilty or innocent, the result was the same. I was out. And no amount of brilliance or integrity or truth was going to change that. So you gave up? No, I let go. Lucas picked up the torch again, adjusting the flame. There's a difference. Adrienne was quiet for a moment, watching him work. Then she said, "What if I could prove you were set up, publicly, irrefutably? What if I could make sure everyone who ever doubted you knew the truth?" Lucas paused, the torch hovering over the sugar. "Why would you do that?" "Because it's the right thing to do. Or because you want something from me." Adrienne didn't deny it. Both can be true. Lucas finished caramelizing the sugar, set the torch aside, and wiped his hands on a towel. "I appreciate the thought, but I'm not interested in revenge, or vindication, or whatever you think I need to feel whole again." "Then what do you need?" "Nothing you can give me." He picked up the plated desserts and walked past her, heading toward the dining room. Adrienne didn't follow, but when Lucas came back 10 minutes later, she was still there, leaning against the stainless steel counter with her arms crossed and a thoughtful expression on her face. "You're persistent," Lucas said. "It's one of my better qualities." Adrienne straightened. "Answer me one question, honestly. Maybe? If you could go back and do it all differently, skip the part where you got framed, keep your career, keep your reputation, would you?" Lucas thought about it, really thought about it. He thought about the man he'd been before everything fell apart. Brilliant, yes, but also isolated, obsessed, so focused on being indispensable that he'd forgotten how to be human. He thought about the relationships he'd let wither, the friendships he'd sacrificed, the version of himself he'd presented to the world because it was easier than being real. Then he thought about Ethan, about the way his son's face lit up when Lucas walked through the door at the end of the day, about the bedtime stories and the scraped knees and the terrible knock-knock jokes, about the small, unremarkable moments that had somehow become the foundation of everything that mattered. "No," Lucas said finally. "I wouldn't." Adrienne looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. Then she nodded. "Okay? Okay? I believe you." She pushed off the counter and headed toward the exit, then paused at the door. "For what it's worth, I think you're making a mistake, but I respect it. Thanks." "And Lucas?" "Yeah? If you ever change your mind, if you ever decide you want to stop hiding and start fighting again, you know where to find me." Then she was gone. Lucas exhaled slowly, tension draining from his shoulders. He told himself it was over, that Adrienne Cole would move on to the next problem, the next acquisition, the next brilliant mind she wanted to recruit, that he'd never see her again. He was wrong. 2 weeks passed. Lucas settled back into his routine. Shifts at the restaurant, mornings with Ethan, the careful, deliberate rhythm of a life built on simplicity rather than ambition. He didn't think about Adrienne's offer, or at least he tried not to. But late at night, when Ethan was asleep and the apartment was quiet, Lucas found himself pulling out his old laptop. He told himself he was just curious, just checking in on the industry he used to dominate, seeing how things had changed in his absence. He told himself a lot of things. What he found surprised him. Adrienne hadn't been exaggerating when she said she'd bought Dalton and Cross. She'd acquired the company 6 months ago, restructured the leadership, and started quietly dismantling the toxic culture that had allowed people like Lucas to be sacrificed for political convenience. She'd installed new ethics protocols, transparent reporting structures, and a whistleblower protection system that actually seemed to have teeth. It was impressive, uncomfortably so. Lucas closed the laptop and shoved it back under the couch. He didn't need to know what Adrienne Cole was doing. It wasn't his world anymore. But the next morning, when he dropped Ethan off at school, one of the other parents cornered him in the parking lot. "Hey, Lucas, right?" The woman, mid-30s, expensive athleisure, aggressively friendly, smiled at him. "I'm Dana. My son's in Ethan's class." "Nice to meet you." "I heard you used to work in corporate strategy. Is that true?" Lucas kept his expression neutral. "A long time ago." "That's so interesting. My husband's in finance, and he's always looking for consultants. Do you have a card?" "I'm not consulting right now." "Oh, well, if you ever want to get back into it, let me know. We know tons of people who could use someone with your background. Lucas smiled politely, extricated himself from the conversation, and spent the rest of the day trying not to think about how word had somehow spread. He didn't know if Adrienne had mentioned him to someone, or if his old reputation was resurfacing on its own, but either way, it made him uneasy. He liked being invisible. He'd worked hard to become invisible, and now, apparently, that was slipping away. The unraveling started small. A week after the parking lot conversation, Lucas got a LinkedIn message from a former colleague, then another, then 3 more. All of them carefully worded, professionally distant, but unmistakably curious. How are you? What are you up to these days? We should grab coffee sometime. Lucas ignored them. Then his manager at Marchand's pulled him aside during a shift. Hey, I got a weird call today. Someone asking about your employment history. I told them we don't give out that information, but do you know why someone would be digging into your background? Lucas's stomach tightened. No idea. Okay, well, just a heads up. Seemed official? Maybe a background check for something? Maybe. But Lucas knew better. Someone was looking into him, and he had a pretty good idea who. That night, after his shift, he found Adrienne waiting for him in the alley again. Same car, same driver, same unshakable composure. You need to stop, Lucas said before she could speak. Adrienne raised an eyebrow. Stop what? Whatever you're doing, the calls, the messages, the background checks. I told you I'm not interested. I'm not doing anything. Then who is? Adrienne hesitated just for a second. The industry moves faster than you think, Lucas. Once people started hearing that I'd identified the real architect behind the Silver Lake disaster, questions started getting asked. Quietly, but consistently. People want to know what happened to you. And you're just, what, letting them dig? I'm not letting them do anything. I'm just not stopping them. Adrienne's expression was calm, measured. You were brilliant, Lucas. People remember that. And now that the truth is starting to surface, they're curious. I don't want them to be curious. I want them to forget I exist. Too late. Lucas felt his control slipping, the careful walls he'd built starting to crack. You had no right. I had every right. You were destroyed by a lie. That lie is being corrected. If you want to stay buried, that's your choice. But I'm not going to help you do it. Why? The word came out raw, frustrated. Why do you care so much? Adrienne stepped closer, her voice dropping. Because I've spent my entire career watching talented people get crushed by systems that don't care about the truth. And I'm tired of it. So if I can fix even one case, if I can prove that integrity actually matters, then I'm going to do it, whether you like it or not. Lucas stared at her, fury and exhaustion warring in his chest. You don't get to decide that for me. You're right. I don't. Adrienne held his gaze. But I'm doing it anyway. She turned and walked back to the car, leaving Lucas standing alone in the alley, fists clenched, heart pounding. He wanted to scream. He wanted to disappear. He wanted to turn back the clock 3 years and make different choices, better choices, choices that wouldn't have led him here. But most of all, he wanted to stop feeling like the world was closing in on him all over again, because this time he wasn't sure he'd survive it. The whispers started 3 days later. Lucas first noticed it when he walked into Marchand's for his Thursday shift, and the hostess, a college student named Maya who barely acknowledged him on normal days, looked up from her podium with something like recognition in her eyes. Not the polite service industry kind. The other kind. The kind that came with questions. Hey, Lucas, she said, drawing out his name like she was testing it. Someone left a message for you. He stopped mid-step. What kind of message? A guy called. Didn't leave a name, just said he wanted to talk to you about old times. Maya shrugged. I told him we don't give out employee info, but he seemed pretty insistent. Lucas felt the familiar tightness return to his chest. If he calls again, don't take a message. Just hang up. That's kind of rude. I don't care. He pushed through to the back, ignoring the look Maya gave him. In the break room, he found 2 of the line cooks scrolling through their phones during their pre-shift smoke break. They glanced up when he entered, and one of them, Marco, a guy Lucas had worked alongside for 2 years without incident, grinned. Yo, Lucas, you famous or something? Lucas froze. What? Marco turned his phone around. On the screen was a LinkedIn article titled, "Whatever Happened to the Strategist Who Shaped the Meridian Deal?" Lucas's name was third on the list, accompanied by a thumbnail photo from 6 years ago, back when he still wore suits and believed competence was a shield. Says here you used to be a big deal, Marco continued, scrolling. Corporate strategy, major acquisitions, all that. Why the hell are you working here? Lucas forced himself to stay calm. That article's old. Someone dug it up for clicks. Yeah, but it's trending today. Someone must have shared it or something. Marco pocketed his phone, still grinning. Man, if I had that kind of resume, I wouldn't be plating salmon for rich people. Different priorities, Lucas said flatly, and left before Marco could ask more questions. The rest of the shift was a disaster. Not because Lucas made mistakes, he didn't, but because he could feel eyes on him constantly. Other servers whispering near the coffee station. The manager giving him speculative looks. Even some of the regulars seemed to study him a little longer than usual, like they were trying to match the waiter refilling their water to the strategist in the article. By the time Lucas clocked out, his jaw was sore from clenching and his shoulders felt like they'd been locked in a vice. He walked home instead of taking the bus, needing the cold air and the movement to burn off the anxiety crawling under his skin. This was Adrian's doing. It had to be. She'd promised to clear his name, to surface the truth, and apparently she didn't care that Lucas had explicitly told her to stay out of it. The woman was like a freight train. Once she decided on a direction, nothing could slow her down. When Lucas got home, Mrs. Chen from next door was sitting on his couch with Ethan, helping him with homework. She was 72, a retired librarian who babysat for him 3 nights a week and refused to accept more than $20 a session. She looked up when he entered, eyes sharp behind her wire-rimmed glasses. You're tense, she observed. Long shift. Mrs. Chen didn't look convinced, but she didn't push. She gathered her knitting bag and stood, joints creaking. Ethan had dinner. Spaghetti. He wanted ice cream, but I told him to ask you. Thanks, Mrs. Chen. Also, someone came by looking for you. Lucas's stomach dropped. Who? Didn't say. Young man, nice suit. Left a card. She pulled a business card from her cardigan pocket and handed it over. Seemed polite enough, but I didn't like the way he looked at the apartment. Too interested. Lucas glanced at the card. Meridian Consulting Group. No name, just a phone number and an email address. He crumpled it in his fist. If anyone else comes by, don't open the door. Just tell them I'm not here. Mrs. Chen studied him for a moment, concern flickering across her weathered face. You in some kind of trouble, Lucas? No, just people from my old life digging around. It'll pass. If you say so. She patted his arm on her way out. But if you need help, you ask. Understand? I understand. After she left, Lucas locked the door and leaned against it, eyes closed. Ethan was sprawled on the floor with a comic book, oblivious to the tension radiating off his father. Lucas watched him for a moment, this small, perfect person who trusted him completely and felt the weight of it settle deeper into his bones. He'd built this life carefully, quietly. He'd chosen invisibility because it was safe, because it meant no one could take anything else from him. And now Adrian Cole was tearing down those walls brick by brick, exposing him to a world he'd worked so hard to escape. Lucas pulled out his phone and typed a message before he could second-guess himself. We need to talk. In person. Tomorrow. Adrian's response came 30 seconds later. My office. 10 a.m. Lucas stared at the message, then shut off his phone and went to make Ethan ice cream. Cole Industries occupied the top 6 floors of a glass tower downtown, the kind of building that looked like it had been designed by someone who confused modern with aggressively uncomfortable. Lucas stood in the lobby the next morning, dressed in the only button-down shirt he still owned that didn't have a wine stain on it, and tried to remember how to breathe like a person who belonged in places like this. The receptionist, immaculate hair, perfect teeth, the kind of professional friendliness that felt like a weapon, smiled at him. Mr. Hale? Yeah. Ms. Cole is expecting you. 32nd floor, elevator on your right. Lucas nodded and crossed the marble expanse, hyper-aware of his scuffed shoes and the fact that he probably looked like someone who'd wandered in by mistake. The elevator was empty, all mirrors and soft lighting, and he avoided looking at his reflection as it climbed. The 32nd floor opened into a reception area that was somehow both minimalist and intimidating. Floor-to-ceiling windows, sleek furniture, abstract art that probably cost more than Lucas's annual salary. Adrian's assistant, Miriam, was waiting by the elevator. "Mr. Hale, this way, please." She led him down a hallway lined with conference rooms, each one filled with people in expensive suits gesturing at whiteboards and laptops. Lucas caught fragments of conversation as they passed: market projections, acquisition targets, regulatory hurdles. The language of a world he used to speak fluently. Adrian's office was at the end of the hall, corner space with windows on two sides and a view that stretched all the way to the river. She stood behind her desk, phone pressed to her ear, and gestured for Lucas to sit. He remained standing. "Well, don't care what the initial assessment said," Adrian was saying, voice calm but unyielding. "Run the numbers again. If the margin's that tight, we're not moving forward." She listened for a moment. "Good. Send me the revised proposal by end of day." She ended the call and set the phone down, turning her full attention to Lucas. "You came. You didn't give me much choice." "You always have a choice." Adrian moved around the desk, leaning against the front edge. "But I'm glad you're here. We need to clear some things up." "You need to stop," Lucas said, skipping past pleasantries. "The calls, the articles, the messages, whatever you're doing to rehabilitate my reputation, it needs to end. Now." "I told you I'm not orchestrating this. The industry doesn't just suddenly remember someone who's been gone for 3 years unless someone reminds them." Lucas stepped closer, frustration bleeding into his voice. "You said you'd respect my decision. You lied." Adrian's expression didn't change. "I said I'd respect your decision to stay out of the corporate world. I never said I'd let the people who destroyed you get away with it." "That's not your call to make." "Actually, it is. I own Dalton and Cross now, which means I have access to every file, every email, every piece of evidence related to what happened to you. And what I found was damning." She crossed her arms. "You were framed by Gerald Moss, the senior VP who wanted your position. He falsified documents, manipulated timelines, and planted evidence to make it look like you'd sabotaged the Silver Lake deal. Then he used his relationship with the board to push you out before you could defend yourself." Lucas felt the air leave his lungs. He'd suspected as much, had spent months piecing together fragments of truth from the wreckage of his career, but hearing it confirmed, spoken aloud by someone who actually had proof, was different, heavier. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked quietly. "Because I'm going to expose him, publicly. I'm releasing a statement next week detailing exactly what happened, with full documentation. Moss is finished, and your name will be cleared." "I didn't ask you to do that." "No. You asked me to leave you alone. But I can't do that, Lucas. Not when I have the power to fix something that was fundamentally wrong." Adrian's voice softened, just slightly. "You deserve better than what they did to you, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows it." Lucas turned away, walking to the window. Below, the city stretched out in all directions. Millions of people living their lives, oblivious to the fact that somewhere in this building, decisions were being made that would ripple out in ways they'd never see. He used to love this view, the sense of being above it all, untouchable. Now it just made him feel small. "What if I don't want my name cleared?" he said. "Then you're lying to yourself." Lucas glanced back at her. "You don't know me." "I know enough." Adrian pushed off the desk, moving to stand beside him at the window. "I know you're brilliant. I know you're principled to the point of self-destruction. And I know you're terrified of letting anyone see you as anything other than the person you've convinced yourself you need to be. And what person is that? Small, unimportant, safe." She met his eyes. "But you're not small, Lucas. You never were. And pretending otherwise isn't protecting your son. It's just teaching him that the world wins when it decides you don't matter." The words hit harder than Lucas expected. He turned away again, jaw tight. "You don't get to use my son to manipulate me." "I'm not manipulating you. I'm telling you the truth." "Your truth." "The truth," Adrian corrected, "which is that you're wasting your potential because you're afraid of getting hurt again. And I understand that fear. I do. But I also know that people like you, people who see problems 3 moves ahead, don't get to sit on the sidelines forever. Eventually, you have to decide whether you're going to let the past define you or whether you're going to fight back. Lucas laughed, bitter and sharp. Fight back. With what? I don't have your resources, your connections, your power. All I have is a kid who needs me and a job that pays the rent. That's not a platform. It's survival. Then let me give you a platform. I don't want your charity. It's not charity. It's strategy. Adrian's tone shifted, becoming more businesslike. I'm not asking you to come work for me full-time. I'm asking you to consult. Contract basis. You work when you want, on projects you choose, at rates you set. No office politics, no corporate ladder, no risk to the life you've built. Just your brain applied to problems that actually matter. Lucas stared at her. Why? Because I have a company full of smart people who think inside the box, and I need someone who doesn't. You don't need me specifically. Yes, I do. Adrian's gaze was steady, unflinching. You see things other people miss. You did it with Meridian, you did it with a dozen other deals before that, and if I'm being honest, I could use that skill set right now. I'm in the middle of 3 acquisitions, 2 restructures, and a regulatory fight that could go either way. My team is good, but they're not you. Lucas shook his head. I can't. Why not? Because the second I step back into this world, even part-time, everything I've worked for falls apart. The anonymity, the stability, the peace. It all goes away. Or, Adrian said slowly, it evolves. You don't have to choose between being a father and being who you actually are, Lucas. You can be both. That's easy for you to say. You don't have a 7-year-old depending on you. No, I don't. Adrian's expression softened, just for a moment. But I watched my mother try to be smaller than she was for years because she thought that's what her family needed. And you know what it did to her? It hollowed her out. By the time she finally let herself take up space again, she'd forgotten how. She paused. Don't do that to yourself. And don't do it to your son. Lucas felt something crack inside him, a fissure in the armor he'd built so carefully over the past 3 years. Because part of him, the part he'd been trying so hard to ignore, knew she was right. He was hiding, and hiding wasn't the same as healing. But the thought of stepping back into the arena, even on his own terms, terrified him. I need time, he said finally. Take all the time you need. Adrian pulled a folder from her desk and handed it to him. But while you're thinking, look at this. It's the framework for one of the acquisitions I mentioned. My team's been working on it for 3 months, and something's off. I can feel it, but I can't see it. Maybe you can. Lucas took the folder more out of reflex than intention. I'm not promising anything. I'm not asking you to. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. If you release that statement about Moss, people are going to come looking for me. I know. And if they find me, my life gets complicated. It's already complicated, Adrian said. At least this way, it's complicated on your terms. Lucas left without responding. He rode the elevator down in silence, folder tucked under his arm, mind racing. When he stepped out into the lobby, his phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Heard you're back in the game. Let's talk. Richard Delacroix. Lucas stared at the name. Delacroix had been a rival at Dalton and Cross, the kind of strategist who treated every interaction like a chess match and every colleague like a potential threat. They'd clashed more than once, usually because Lucas had outmaneuvered him on high-stakes deals. He deleted the message and kept walking. That night, after Ethan was asleep, Lucas sat at the kitchen table and opened the folder Adrian had given him. Inside was a detailed breakdown of a proposed acquisition, Coal Industries buying a mid-sized logistics company called Hartwell Transit. The numbers looked solid at first glance. Revenue projections, market analysis, integration costs. Everything seemed to add up. But Lucas had learned a long time ago that the numbers that seemed to add up were usually the ones hiding the biggest problems. He started reading more carefully, cross-referencing figures, looking for inconsistencies. It took him 40 minutes to find the first red flag, a discrepancy in the asset valuation that was small enough to miss but significant enough to matter. Then he found another, and another. By midnight, Lucas had filled 3 pages with notes, each one outlining a flaw in the deal structure that Adrian's team had either missed or chosen to ignore. The acquisition wasn't just risky, it was a trap. Hartwell Transit's financials were cleaner on paper than they were in practice, and if coal industries moved forward without addressing the gaps, they'd be absorbing liabilities that would take years to unwind. Lucas set down his pen and rubbed his eyes. He hadn't felt this kind of clarity in years, the sharp, focused energy that came from solving a puzzle no one else could see. It was intoxicating and terrifying, because if he sent these notes to Adrienne, he'd be proving her point. He'd be stepping back into the role he'd sworn he was done with, and once he did that, there'd be no going back. He picked up his phone, typed out a message, then deleted it, typed another. Deleted that one too. Finally, at 1 a.m, he just took a photo of his notes and sent them to Adrienne with a single line of text. "You're walking into a minefield. Here's the map." Her response came 2 minutes later. "I knew you'd see it. Can we meet tomorrow?" Lucas stared at the message, heart pounding. Then he typed back. "No, I gave you what you needed. That's it." "Lucas, I mean it, Adrienne. I'm not doing this." There was a long pause. Then, "Okay, but if you change your mind, you know where to find me." Lucas shut off his phone and sat in the dark kitchen, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic. He told himself he'd done the right thing. He'd helped, but he'd maintained his boundaries. He'd proven he could still think strategically without getting dragged back into the world that had destroyed him. But deep down, he knew the truth. He'd just opened a door he'd been trying to keep closed for 3 years. And Adrienne Cole wasn't the kind of person who let doors stay open without walking through them. The next 2 weeks were quieter, but not in a way that felt safe. Lucas went back to his routine, shifts at Marchand's. Mornings with Ethan, evenings spent trying not to think about the folder he'd analyzed or the messages he'd ignored. Adrienne didn't reach out again, which should have been a relief, but instead felt like the calm before something he couldn't name. Then, on a Wednesday afternoon, Lucas got a call from his manager. "Hey, we need to talk. Can you come in early today?" Lucas's stomach tightened. "What's going on?" "Just come in. I'll explain when you get here." When Lucas arrived at Marchand's 2 hours before his shift, he found his manager, a perpetually stressed man named Tom, waiting in the office with an uncomfortable expression on his face. "Sit down," Tom said. Lucas sat. "What happened?" "Someone made a reservation for tonight, high-profile client, requested you specifically as their server." "That's not how this works. We rotate tables." "I know, but this person was insistent, offered a significant gratuity if we accommodated the request." Tom shifted in his chair. "Look, normally I'd tell them to take a hike, but the name attached to the reservation is Adrienne Cole, and I looked her up. She's kind of a big deal." Lucas closed his eyes. "You've got to be kidding me." "I told her it was unusual, but she said you'd understand." "Do you?" "Yeah, I understand." Lucas stood. "Tell her I'm not available." "Lucas?" "I'm serious, Tom. I don't care how much she's offering. Tell her no." Tom looked genuinely pained. "She already prepaid $5,000. As a tip. For one table." Lucas felt the ground shift under him. $5,000. That was nearly 2 months' rent, Ethan's school expenses for a semester, the kind of money that could mean the difference between barely surviving and actually having a cushion. And Adrienne knew it. "She's backing me into a corner," Lucas said quietly. "I don't know what's going on between you two, but if you don't want to do this, I'll refund her and explain that—" "No." Lucas cut him off, jaw tight. "I'll do it, but this is the last time." Tom looked relieved. "Table's at 8, party of 1. 5. Adrienne arrived exactly on time, dressed in a navy suit that looked effortless and probably cost more than Lucas's car. She didn't smile when Lucas approached the table, just gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit." "I'm working." "You're also the only person in this restaurant I want to talk to, so sit." Lucas glanced around. The dining room was half full, other servers moving between tables, no one paying attention to them. He sat. "You can't keep doing this," he said. "Doing what?" "Manipulating me. Showing up at my job, throwing money around, forcing conversations I don't want to have." Adrienne leaned back, studying him. "I'm not forcing anything. You could have refused. You offered my manager $5,000. That's not a request. It's a bribe." It's compensation for your time. She paused. And an apology. Lucas blinked. What? You were right. I overstepped. I told you I'd respect your boundaries, and then I didn't. I pushed because I thought I knew what was best, and that was arrogant. Adrienne's voice was steady, but there was something beneath it, something that almost sounded like sincerity. So I'm apologizing, and I'm offering you one last thing before I walk away for good. What? The truth about why I'm really doing this. Lucas waited. Adrienne took a breath. 10 years ago, I was where you are now. Different circumstances, same result. I was a junior executive at a firm that got acquired by a larger company. During the transition, someone high up decided I was a threat. They manufactured a scandal, destroyed my credibility, and pushed me out. I spent 2 years trying to rebuild, and no one would touch me. No one believed me. And the people who did believe me didn't have the power to fix it. Lucas felt something shift in his chest. How'd you get out? I didn't. I started over. Built a new company from scratch. Kept my head down. Worked twice as hard as everyone else. And when I finally had enough leverage, I went back and bought the firm that destroyed me. Cleaned house. Made sure it never happened to anyone else. She met his eyes. But I was lucky. I had resources, connections, a safety net. You don't. And I can't stand watching someone with your talent get buried because the system's rigged. And no one with power gives a damn. Lucas stared at her, something unnamed tightening in his throat. So this is about you. This is about both of us. Adrienne's gaze didn't waver. I'm trying to do for you what no one did for me. And yeah, maybe I'm doing it badly. Maybe I'm pushing too hard. But I'd rather push and fail than stand by and do nothing. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Lucas said, "The analysis I sent you, did it help? You saved us from a disaster. We would have walked straight into that acquisition and spent the next 3 years drowning in lawsuits and debt restructuring." Adrienne smiled, faint but genuine. So yeah, it helped. Good. Lucas. Adrienne leaned forward. I meant what I said. If you want me to walk away, I will. No more calls, no more surprise visits, no more offers. I'll clear your name, release the statement about Moss, and make sure you're left alone. But if you want something different, if you want a chance to step back into your life on your own terms, then I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere. Lucas looked at her. This woman who'd barged into his carefully constructed world and refused to leave, who saw him as something more than a cautious, broken man trying to survive. Part of him wanted to tell her to go, to take her apology, and her money, and her impossible expectations, and leave him in peace. But another part of him, the part he'd been trying to silence for 3 years, wanted something else entirely. I need to think, he said finally. Take all the time you need. Adrienne stood, leaving an envelope on the table. The $5,000. It's yours regardless. And Lucas? Yeah? Thank you. For the analysis, and for sitting with me tonight. She left before he could respond. Lucas sat alone at the table for a moment, staring at the envelope, then picked it up and slipped it into his pocket. When he returned to the kitchen, Marco gave him a knowing grin. That the CEO lady who keeps showing up? Yeah. She into you or something? Lucas thought about it. I honestly don't know. But as he finished his shift and walked home through the cold night air, envelope heavy in his pocket, he realized it didn't matter what Adrienne wanted from him. What mattered was what he wanted from himself. And for the first time in 3 years, Lucas wasn't entirely sure what that was anymore. The envelope sat on Lucas's kitchen counter for 3 days, unopened. He walked past it every morning while making Ethan breakfast, every evening while cleaning up dinner, every night when he couldn't sleep and ended up staring at the refrigerator like it held answers. The money inside felt less like a gift and more like a question he wasn't ready to answer. On the 4th day, Ethan noticed it. What's that? He asked, pointing with a spoon dripping milk. Nothing important. Looks important. It's fancy. Lucas picked it up, turned it over in his hands. Someone gave me some money for helping them with work stuff. Ethan's eyes went wide. Like a lot? Yeah, a lot. Are we rich now? Lucas almost laughed. No, buddy, we're not rich. But we could get pizza tonight instead of spaghetti again? Yeah, we could get pizza. Ethan grinned and Lucas felt the weight in his chest shift slightly. He opened the envelope later that morning after dropping Ethan at school, counted the bills twice to make sure his eyes weren't lying, then deposited the check at the bank with shaking hands. $5,000. It was real, and it changed things in ways he wasn't ready to process. That afternoon, his phone rang. Unknown number. Lucas almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Mr. Hale? The voice was male, polished, unfamiliar. My name is David Crenshaw. I'm the CFO at Hartwell Transit. Lucas's grip tightened on the phone. How did you get this number? Through mutual contacts. I understand you recently reviewed our acquisition proposal with Cole Industries. I didn't review anything. I don't work for Cole Industries. Perhaps not officially, but your analysis was shared with our team during negotiations. Crenshaw paused. You identified several structural issues that our own advisors missed, issues that would have caused significant problems down the line. Good for you. Mr. Hale, I'm calling because I'd like to hire you. Lucas stopped walking. He was halfway through the park near Ethan's school, surrounded by joggers and dog walkers and people living normal lives. I'm not available. I haven't told you what the job is yet. Doesn't matter. I'm not interested. We're willing to pay consulting rates. $200,000 for 6 months of strategic advisory work. Flexible hours, remote options, full discretion. The number hit Lucas like a punch. $200,000. That was more than he'd made in the last 3 years combined. That was Ethan's college fund. That was stability, security, breathing room. Who else has this number? Lucas asked quietly. I'm sorry? You said you got it through mutual contacts. I want to know who else has access to my personal information. Crenshaw hesitated. I was given your number by someone at Cole Industries. I assumed it was with your consent. It wasn't. I apologize. That's unprofessional on my end, but the offer stands, Mr. Hale. You have a rare skill set, and there are people willing to pay for it. If you're interested, call me back. He rattled off a number, then hung up before Lucas could respond. Lucas stood in the middle of the park, phone still pressed to his ear, and felt the careful walls he'd built start to crumble. This was what Adrienne had warned him about. Once the industry knew he was available, even peripherally, the offers would come, and they wouldn't stop. He called Adrienne. She picked up on the second ring. Lucas? Did you give Hartwell Transit my number? No, but I can guess how they got it. Her voice was tight. Someone on my team must have shared your contact info during the negotiation. I'll find out who and make sure it doesn't happen again. It's too late. The damage is done. What did Crenshaw offer you? $200,000. 6 months. Adrienne was quiet for a moment. Are you going to take it? No. Why not? Because I don't trust him, or his company, or anyone else who's suddenly interested in hiring the guy they blacklisted 3 years ago. Lucas exhaled hard. This is exactly what I was trying to avoid. I know, and I'm sorry. Adrienne's tone shifted, becoming more careful. But Lucas, if people are reaching out, it means your reputation is being restored. That's a good thing. Not if I didn't ask for it. You didn't ask to be destroyed either, but it happened anyway. At least now you have options. Lucas leaned against a bench, watching a woman throw a tennis ball for her golden retriever. Options aren't freedom. They're just another kind of cage. Then don't take the job. Tell Crenshaw to go to hell. But don't pretend you're not capable of more than what you're doing right now. I'm capable of being a father. That's enough. Is it? Adrienne's voice was gentle but relentless. Or are you just telling yourself that because it's easier than admitting you missed this? Lucas ended the call. He sat on the bench for 20 minutes, phone in his lap, watching strangers live their uncomplicated lives. Then he called Crenshaw back and left a voicemail declining the offer. Short, professional, final. When he picked Ethan up from school that afternoon, his son was buzzing with energy, talking a mile a minute about a science project involving volcanoes and baking soda. Lucas listened, nodded in the right places, and tried to focus on the present instead of the future closing in around him. But that night, after Ethan was asleep, Lucas found himself pulling out his old laptop again. He told himself he was just curious, just checking to see if there were any other articles, any other mentions of his name floating around in the digital ether. What he found made his stomach drop. Adrienne had released her statement. It was everywhere. Business journals, industry blogs, Even a few mainstream news sites had picked it up. The headline on the largest one read, "Coal Industries CEO exposes corporate fraud, clears name of former strategist." The article detailed everything: Gerald Moss's manipulation, the falsified documents, the cover-up at Dalton and Cross. And right in the middle of it was Lucas's name, attached to words like brilliant, vindicated, and wrongfully terminated. Lucas scrolled through the article, hands numb. Adrienne had kept her word. She'd cleared his name publicly, irrefutably, with documentation that left no room for doubt. Moss was being investigated. Dalton and Cross was issuing formal apologies. The industry was, for lack of a better word, correcting itself. But she'd also made Lucas visible again. His phone started buzzing before he even finished reading. Messages from numbers he didn't recognize, LinkedIn requests, emails flooding his old account that he hadn't checked in years. Everyone wanted a piece of him now. Everyone wanted to talk, to hire, to reconnect. Lucas shut the laptop and sat in the dark, listening to his phone vibrate against the table like a swarm of angry bees. He wanted to be grateful. He wanted to feel vindicated, relieved, like justice had finally caught up with the people who'd destroyed him. Instead, he just felt exposed. The next morning, Lucas called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years. He didn't trust himself to be around people, to keep his expression neutral while serving wine to strangers who might recognize his name from the news. Tom sounded concerned when Lucas called, asked if everything was okay, and Lucas lied smoothly. "Just a stomach bug. I'll be back tomorrow." He spent the day fielding calls he didn't answer and deleting emails he didn't read. By noon, his inbox had over 300 unread messages. By evening, it was close to 500. Recruiters, former colleagues, journalists asking for interviews, people claiming to have always believed in him. Lucas deleted them all. Around 7, someone knocked on his apartment door. Lucas froze, muscles tensing. Mrs. Chen had already picked up Ethan and taken him to her place for dinner, something about giving Lucas space to rest, so he was alone. Vulnerable. He checked the peephole and saw Adrienne standing in the hallway, hands in her coat pockets, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. Lucas opened the door but didn't invite her in. "How did you get my address?" "Public records." Adrienne met his eyes. "Can I come in?" "No." "Lucas, you said you'd walk away if I asked. I'm asking." Adrienne flinched just slightly. "I know, and I will, but I need to say something first." Lucas waited, arms crossed. "I didn't release that statement to hurt you," Adrienne said. "I released it because it was the truth, and because Moss deserved to be held accountable. But I underestimated how much attention it would generate, and I didn't prepare you for the fallout. That was a mistake, and I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't make my phone stop ringing." "I know." Adrienne pulled an envelope from her pocket, different from the last one, thinner. "This is a list of every person who contacted Coal Industries asking about you in the last 24 hours. Names, companies, what they wanted. I thought you should know who's circling." Lucas took the envelope, not opening it. "Why?" "Because information is power, and right now you need all the power you can get." "I don't want power. I want to be left alone." "Then you're going to be disappointed." Adrienne's voice was firm, but not unkind. "Because that option's gone now. The industry knows you exist again, and they're not going to forget. So you have 2 choices. You can hide and let them define you on their terms, or you can step up and define yourself on yours. That's not a choice. That's a threat. It's reality." Adrienne stepped back, giving him space. "I'm not going to push anymore. I meant what I said. If you want me gone, I'm gone. But if you change your mind, if you decide you want help navigating this, I'm here." She turned and walked down the hallway before Lucas could respond. He watched her go, envelope in hand, and felt the exhaustion settle deeper into his bones. Inside, he opened the envelope and scanned the list. 37 names. Some he recognized, most he didn't. Investment firms, consulting groups, private equity funds. All of them looking for the same thing. Lucas Hale's brain packaged and ready to deploy. He tossed the list on the counter and sat down hard in the nearest chair. 3 weeks passed in a blur of avoidance. Lucas went back to work, kept his head down, and ignored every message that came through. The initial frenzy died down slightly, People moved on to the next scandal, the next story. But the attention didn't disappear completely. It just simmered, waiting. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, Tom pulled him aside during prep. "We need to talk." Lucas set down the silverware he'd been polishing. "What's going on?" "Corporate called. They saw the articles about you." Tom looked uncomfortable. "They're concerned about the attention it might bring to the restaurant." Lucas felt ice settle in his stomach. "They want me gone. They want to reevaluate your position, which is corporate speak for the same thing." Tom ran a hand through his thinning hair. "I'm sorry, Lucas. I fought for you, but they're worried about reporters showing up, customers asking questions. They think it's a liability." "I haven't done anything wrong." "I know, but that doesn't matter to them." Tom looked genuinely pained. "You've got 2 weeks. They'll give you severance, good references, the whole package. But after that, I'm out." "Yeah." Lucas nodded slowly, processing. He'd known this was a possibility from the moment Adrienne released her statement, but knowing and experiencing were different things. "Okay. That's it? Just okay? What else is there to say?" Lucas picked up the silverware again. "I'll finish my shifts." Professional to the end. Tom studied him for a moment, then shook his head. "You're a better man than I'd be in your position." Lucas didn't respond, because the truth was, he wasn't feeling particularly noble. He was feeling cornered, trapped in a situation he'd explicitly tried to avoid, watching the life he'd carefully constructed fall apart for the second time in 3 years. That night, after his shift, Lucas didn't go straight home. He walked. Block after block, no destination in mind, just moving to keep the thoughts at bay. He ended up in front of Cole Industries without meaning to, staring up at the glass tower like it held answers. His phone buzzed. A message from Adrienne. "I heard about Marchand's. I'm sorry." Lucas stared at the text, jaw tight. He started to type a response, deleted it, started again. Finally settled on, "How did you hear? I have friends in the restaurant industry. Word travels?" "Of course it does." There was a pause, then, "I have an opening. Senior strategic advisor. Your own office, your own team, your own terms. Say the word, and it's yours." Lucas felt something snap inside him. He typed back fast, anger bleeding through. "You don't get it. I don't want your job. I don't want your money. I don't want your world. I just want to live my life without everything I touch turning to ash." The response came immediately. "Then stop running and start fighting. You're better than this. You don't know what I'm better than. You don't know me. I know enough." Lucas shoved his phone in his pocket and kept walking. He walked until his legs ached, until the cold bit through his jacket, until he couldn't feel anything but the rhythm of his feet against pavement. When he finally made it home, it was past midnight. Mrs. Chen had left a note saying Ethan was asleep at her place, and Lucas could pick him up in the morning. Lucas sat on the couch in the dark apartment and let himself feel everything he'd been holding back. The anger, the fear, the exhaustion of trying to be small in a world that kept forcing him to be big. The grief of losing something he'd never wanted to lose in the first place. And underneath it all, a question he couldn't escape. What if Adrienne was right? The catalyst came 4 days later in the form of a phone call Lucas almost didn't answer. "Mr. Hale? This is Jennifer Park. I'm the general counsel at Cole Industries." Lucas straightened. "What can I do for you?" "I'm calling because we have a situation, and Ms. Cole believes you might be able to help." Park's voice was professional, clipped. "We're in the final stages of acquiring North Point Dynamics. The deal's worth $800 million, and we're scheduled to close in 72 hours. "Okay." "This morning, our due diligence team found an irregularity in North Point's financial statements, something buried deep in their subsidiary structure. My team's been working on it for 6 hours, and we can't figure out if it's a reporting error or something more serious." "And you're calling me because?" "Because Ms. Cole reviewed the files and said if anyone could untangle this, it's you." Park paused. "We need an answer in 48 hours, Mr. Hale. If we can't verify the integrity of these numbers, we walk away from the deal. $800 million, 18 months of work, and a strategic acquisition that positions us as a market leader, gone." Lucas closed his eyes. "Send me the files." "You'll do it?" "Send me the files, and I'll look. I'm not promising anything beyond that." "Thank you. I'll have everything in your inbox within the hour." Park hung up. Lucas sat staring at his phone, heart pounding. This was it. The moment where he either stayed in the shallow end or dove back into the deep water. He could ignore the files, let coal industries figure it out on their own, maintain his distance. Or he could do what he was built to do. The files arrived 30 minutes later. Lucas opened his laptop, downloaded everything, and started reading. Within 20 minutes, he was deep in the weeds, cross-referencing balance sheets, tracing revenue streams, mapping subsidiary relationships. The irregularity Park mentioned was buried in a shell company 3 layers removed from North Point's primary operations, disguised as a routine capital transfer. But it wasn't routine. It was a liability dump. Someone at North Point had been systematically moving debt off the main books and into subsidiaries that weren't included in the standard reporting. It was legal, technically, but barely. And if coal industries acquired North Point without accounting for it, they'd inherit $40 million in hidden liabilities that would surface 6 months post-acquisition, right when it was too late to do anything about it. Lucas worked through the night, building a model that traced every transaction, every transfer, every shell company involved. By dawn, he had a complete picture, not just of the problem, but of how to fix it. Coal industries could renegotiate the purchase price to account for the hidden debt, or they could structure the deal to isolate the problematic subsidiaries and let North Point retain the liability. Either way, the acquisition could move forward, but only if someone had the leverage to force North Point into renegotiation. Lucas sent his analysis to Park at 6 in the morning, along with 3 potential solutions and a recommendation. Then he collapsed on the couch and slept for 4 hours. When he woke up, his phone was ringing. Adrienne. "You found it," she said without preamble. "Yeah." "You saved the deal." "Maybe. Depends on whether North Point agrees to renegotiate." "They will. We're meeting with them in 2 hours, and your analysis gives us everything we need." Adrienne's voice was steady, but there was something beneath it. Relief, maybe, or gratitude. "Lucas, I don't know how to thank you." "You can start by not calling me at 10 in the morning." She laughed, quiet and genuine. "Fair." A pause. "I'm serious, though. You just saved this company from a disaster that would have taken years to unwind. That matters." "I know." "Do you?" Adrienne's tone shifted. "Because I get the sense you still think what you do isn't important. But it is. You see things no one else sees, and that's not a small thing. It's rare, and it's valuable." Lucas sat up, rubbing his face. "I need to ask you something." "Okay. Why do you care so much? And don't give me the line about fixing what happened to you. There's something else. What is it?" Adrienne was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "Because I spent 10 years building an empire, and the whole time I was surrounded by people who were smart but not brave. People who could execute but couldn't innovate. People who followed the rules because breaking them was too risky." She paused. "And then I saw your work, the way you approached problems, the way you weren't afraid to say the thing everyone else was thinking but wouldn't voice. And I thought, that's what I need. That's what this company needs. Someone who isn't afraid to be right, even when it's inconvenient." Lucas didn't know what to say to that. "You don't have to decide anything right now," Adrienne continued. "But I want you to know that door's still open. And it's not because I need you. It's because I think you need this, more than you're willing to admit." "Maybe. That's progress." He could hear the smile in her voice. "I'll let you get back to sleep. But Lucas?" "Yeah? Thank you. For this. For all of it." She hung up before he could respond. Lucas sat on the couch, phone in hand, and stared at the laptop still open on the coffee table. Files scattered across the screen, his notes in the margins, the kind of work he used to do every day without thinking twice. And for the first time in 3 years, he didn't feel trapped by it. He felt alive. The next 48 hours moved fast. Park called with updates. North Point had agreed to renegotiate, the deal was being restructured, everything was on track. Adrienne sent a message thanking him again and attaching a contract for consulting work. No pressure, just an option if he wanted it. Lucas didn't respond, but he didn't delete it either. Instead, he spent the time thinking about what he wanted, about who he was, about whether the life he'd built out of necessity was the same as the life he actually wanted to live. On Thursday evening, he picked Ethan up from school and took him to the park. They sat on the swings, Ethan kicking his legs to go higher while Lucas pushed gently, lost in thought. "Dad?" Ethan said after a while. "Yeah, bud? Are we moving?" Lucas stopped pushing. "What? No, why would you think that? Tommy's mom said she saw an article about you. She said you used to be important." Ethan looked back at him, eyes curious. "Are you important again?" Lucas crouched down so they were eye level. "I'm important to you. That's what matters. But were you important to other people too?" "I used to be. A long time ago." "Do you miss it?" The question hit Lucas harder than he expected. He thought about the last 3 weeks, the analysis he'd done, the problem he'd solved, the clarity that came from using his brain the way it was meant to be used. He thought about the exhaustion of pretending to be smaller than he was, the weight of carrying a lie that had started to feel like truth. "Yeah," Lucas said quietly. "I think I do." Ethan tilted his head. "Then why don't you do it again?" "Because it's complicated. Grown-up stuff is always complicated." Ethan kicked off again, swinging higher. "But you're really smart, Dad. You could figure it out." Lucas watched his son swing, the 7-year-old with more clarity than most adults Lucas had ever met, and felt something shift inside him. Not a decision, exactly, but the beginning of one. That night, after Ethan was asleep, Lucas opened the contract Adrienne had sent. He read it carefully, noting the terms, the flexibility, the built-in protections. It wasn't a trap. It was an offer. A real one. And for the first time since this whole thing started, Lucas let himself consider saying yes. He didn't sign it, not yet. But he didn't delete it either. Instead, he sent Adrienne a message. "I want to meet. Tomorrow. Just you and me. No office, no contracts, no pressure. I need to understand what this actually looks like before I decide anything." Her response came 5 minutes later. "Coffee shop on 5th and Brennan. 9 a.m. "I'll be there." Lucas set his phone down and exhaled slowly. He still didn't know what he was going to do, but he knew he couldn't keep running, not anymore. The coffee shop was the kind of place that tried too hard to be unpretentious. Exposed brick, mismatched furniture, handwritten menu boards that looked like someone's art school project. Lucas arrived 10 minutes early and claimed a table in the back corner, away from the windows and the foot traffic. He ordered black coffee and waited, watching the door. Adrienne walked in at exactly 9, dressed down in jeans and a sweater that probably still cost more than Lucas's entire wardrobe. She spotted him immediately, wove through the crowded space, and sat down across from him without ceremony. "You look tired," she said. "I am tired." "The North Point analysis?" "That. Other things." Lucas wrapped his hands around his mug. "I need you to be honest with me." "I'm always honest with you." "No, you're strategic with me. There's a difference." Lucas met her eyes. "I want to know what you actually want. Not the version you think I need to hear. The real thing." Adrienne leaned back, considering. Then she said, "I want you to work for me. Full-time, eventually. I want your brain applied to the problems my company faces because I think you're the best strategist I've ever encountered. And I want to rebuild your career because I believe you deserve it, and because it benefits me to have someone that talented in my corner." "That's honest." "You asked for honest." Lucas took a drink of coffee, letting the bitterness ground him. "What happens if I say yes? Walk me through it. The actual day-to-day, not the theoretical version." Adrienne folded her hands on the table. "You start as a consultant, contract work, project-based. You set your hours, choose which deals you want to work on, operate remotely if you want. No office requirement, no FaceTime politics. You'd report directly to me, no intermediaries. After 6 months, if it's working for both of us, we renegotiate. Maybe you come on full-time, maybe you stay contract. Your choice." "And the pay?" "Consulting rate is $1,500 an hour, capped at 40 hours a week. That's $300,000 annually if you max out, but you wouldn't have to. You could work 20 hours and still clear 6 figures." Lucas did the math in his head. Even at halftime, that was more money than he'd ever made. More than he'd thought possible after everything that happened. It was security. It was freedom. It was everything he had told himself he didn't want. "What about Ethan?" he asked. "What about him?" "I can't work the kind of hours I used to. I won't miss bedtime. I won't skip school events. I won't become the kind of father who's always somewhere else. I'm not asking you to. Adrienne's voice was firm. I have executives with kids. They make it work. You set boundaries, you communicate them clearly, and you stick to them. If I need something outside your availability, I find someone else, or I wait. That's how it works. And if there's an emergency, a deal falling apart at midnight, a client demanding answers on a Sunday, then I handle it, or my team handles it. You're not the only smart person in my company, Lucas. You're just the best at seeing what others miss. But that doesn't mean you're indispensable 24/7. Lucas studied her, looking for the catch. There had to be a catch. People didn't offer this kind of flexibility without strings attached. Why are you being so reasonable about this? Because I've seen what happens when talented people burn out. They become bitter, ineffective, or they leave. And I'd rather have you at 70% capacity and happy than 100% and miserable. Adrienne paused. Also, I meant what I said before. I don't want you to become your job. I want you to have a life. That's not altruism. That's strategy. People who have lives outside work make better decisions. Lucas turned his mug in slow circles, thinking. Everything she was saying made sense. It was reasonable, balanced, designed to address every concern he'd raised, which meant either Adrienne was genuinely trying to build something sustainable, or she was very good at making traps look like opportunities. I need a week, he said finally. Take 2 if you need it. And I want to talk to some of your other employees, off the record. People who actually work for you, not the ones you'd handpick to sell me on the company. Adrienne smiled, faint but approving. I'll send you a list of names. You can reach out to whoever you want. Ask whatever you want. I won't interfere. Okay. Lucas took another drink, letting the silence settle. Then he said, Can I ask you something personal? You can ask. I might not answer. Why don't you have kids? Adrienne blinked, clearly not expecting that. What does that have to do with anything? You keep talking about understanding work-life balance, about making space for people to have lives outside the job. But I've never seen you mention family, relationships, anything that isn't coal industries. So either you're lying about understanding it, or you've made a choice I need to understand before I trust you. For a long moment, Adrienne didn't respond. She looked out the window, watching people hurry past with their coffee and their phones and their small urgent problems. Then she said, I got married at 26. He was ambitious, smart, charming. We were going to build something together. Empire, family, all of it. What happened? He wanted me to be smaller, not in obvious ways. He never said quit your job or stay home. But every time I got promoted, he'd make a comment about how I was never around. Every time I closed a big deal, he'd mention how stressed I seemed. And slowly, I started making myself smaller to make him comfortable. Turned down opportunities, softened my edges. Pretended I didn't want the things I wanted. How long did that last? 3 years. Then I woke up one day and realized I'd become someone I didn't recognize. So I left. Filed for divorce, took the settlement, and started over. Adrienne looked back at him. I don't have kids because I never found someone who could handle me at full size, and I wasn't willing to shrink again. Lucas absorbed that. You ever regret it? Sometimes. Late at night, when it's quiet, and I'm the only one in a building that holds 300 employees during the day. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. But regret's just the price of choosing yourself, and I'd rather pay it than spend my life wondering what I could have been. That's honest. You asked for honest. They sat in silence for a while, 2 people who'd made different versions of the same choice, staring at each other across a table in a coffee shop that smelled like burnt espresso and ambition. Finally, Lucas said, I'll think about it. Seriously, not just as a way to avoid the conversation. That's all I'm asking. Adrienne stood, pulling on her coat. For what it's worth, I think you'd be good at this. Not just the work, the whole thing. Balancing it. Why? Because you've already figured out what matters. Most people spend their whole lives trying to learn that lesson. You've got a head start. She left before Lucas could respond. He sat alone at the table for another 20 minutes, staring into his empty mug and trying to imagine what his life would look like if he said yes. Different, certainly. Complicated, but maybe not worse, maybe just different. Lucas spent the next week doing exactly what he'd promised. He reached out to 5 people on the list Adrian sent: 3 mid-level managers, 1 senior director, and an executive assistant who'd been with Coal Industries since Adrian took over. He asked them about hours, culture, work-life balance, whether Adrian's promises matched reality. The answers were surprisingly consistent: long hours during crunch times, but not unsustainable; clear boundaries when you set them; a boss who demanded excellence but didn't punish humanity. One manager mentioned taking 2 weeks off for his kid's surgery and coming back to find his projects redistributed. No questions asked, no resentment. Adrian's intense, the guy said, but she's not unreasonable. You set expectations, you meet them, she leaves you alone. It's not a cult, it's just a job. The executive assistant was more blunt. Look, I've worked for 4 CEOs, 3 of them were nightmares. Adrian's the only one who's ever asked me about my life outside work, and meant it. By the end of the week, Lucas had a clear picture. Coal Industries wasn't perfect. There were still politics, still pressure, still the occasional all-nighter when a deal went sideways. But it was functional, and compared to the toxic wasteland of Dalton and Cross, it looked like paradise. Lucas still didn't know what he wanted to do. On Saturday morning, he took Ethan to the Children's Museum. They spent 3 hours building elaborate structures out of foam blocks, racing wooden cars down ramps, and pretending to run a grocery store where everything cost exactly $1. Ethan was in heaven. Lucas tried to be present, tried to focus on his son's laughter instead of the decision weighing on him like a stone, but his mind kept drifting. "Dad, you're not listening," Ethan said at one point, tugging on Lucas's sleeve. "Sorry, bud. What'd you say?" I said, "Do you think astronauts get lonely in space?" Lucas crouched down, meeting Ethan's eyes. "Probably sometimes, but they chose to go up there. That's got to count for something." "Would you go to space if you could?" "I don't know. Would you?" Ethan considered this seriously. "Only if you came with me." Lucas felt his chest tighten. "Deal." They went home after lunch. Ethan wanted to watch a movie, something animated with too many songs and a predictable moral about believing in yourself. Lucas let him pick, settled onto the couch beside him, and tried not to think about the fact that moments like this, simple, uncomplicated, just the 2 of them, might become rarer if he took Adrian's offer. Or maybe they wouldn't. Maybe he was catastrophizing. Maybe it was possible to have both. His phone buzzed halfway through the movie. A message from Adrian. "No pressure. Just checking in." Lucas typed back, still thinking. "Good. That means you're taking it seriously." He set the phone down and pulled Ethan closer. On screen, the cartoon protagonist was learning that true strength came from working together. Lucas had heard this moral 100 times in 100 different movies, and it never got less cliched. But sitting here with his son tucked under his arm, he wondered if maybe the cliché existed for a reason. Maybe you weren't supposed to do everything alone. On Monday morning, Lucas got a call that changed everything. He was dropping Ethan off at school when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something made him answer. "Mr. Hale?" A woman's voice, tight with urgency. "This is Samantha Reeves. I'm the acting CEO at North Point Dynamics." Lucas stopped walking. "What can I do for you?" "I need to hire you. Immediately." "I'm not available for—" "Please, just listen." Reeves's voice cracked slightly. "We restructured the deal with Coal Industries based on your analysis. It saved the acquisition, saved our company. But now we have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "The board member who set up those hidden liabilities? He didn't just resign quietly. He's threatening to blow up the entire acquisition with a lawsuit claiming we breached fiduciary duty by exposing his actions. If he succeeds, the deal collapses. Coal Industries walks, and North Point goes under." "Wait." Lucas felt his pulse quicken. "What do you need from me?" "We need someone who can untangle his argument, find the holes, and build a countercase strong enough to shut him down before he files. Our legal team is good, but they're not strategists. They can't see the bigger picture the way you can." Reeves paused. "I'm offering you $250,000 for 2 weeks of work. Full access to everything, total transparency. Just help us survive this." Lucas stood in the school parking lot, watching other parents hug their kids goodbye and drive off to jobs that didn't involve corporate warfare. He thought about Adrian's offer, about the life he'd been trying to build, about the fact that he'd promised himself he wouldn't get dragged back into this world. But he also thought about the people at North Point who'd lose their jobs if the company went under. The families depending on those paychecks. The cascading damage one vindictive board member could cause just because he'd been caught cheating the system. "Send me everything you have," Lucas said. "I'll look at it, no promises." "Thank you. Thank you so much." Reeves hung up. Lucas stood there for another minute, phone in hand, feeling the last of his resistance crumble. This was who he was, not a waiter. Not someone who could walk away from problems that needed solving. He was a strategist, and denying it wasn't protecting him. It was just making him miserable. He called Adrienne. She picked up immediately. "Lucas, I need to tell you something." "Okay." "North Point just tried to hire me. Their board members threatening to sue and tank the acquisition." There was a brief pause. "Are you going to help them?" "I don't know yet, but I wanted you to hear it from me before you heard it from someone else." "I appreciate that." Adrienne's voice was calm, measured. "For what it's worth, if you do take it, I'm not going to see it as a conflict. North Point's success is my success at this point. The acquisition only works if they're stable." "You're not worried I'll prioritize them over you?" "No. Because I know you'll do the right thing regardless of who's paying you. That's why I want you in the first place." Lucas exhaled slowly. "I think I'm going to say yes, to both of you." "Both?" "North Point for this crisis. You for everything after. Consulting basis, the terms you laid out. I'll set my boundaries and you'll respect them. And if it doesn't work, we walk away clean." "Lucas?" Adrienne's voice softened. "Are you sure?" "No, but I'm tired of being sure. I spent 3 years being sure I wanted to stay invisible, and all it did was make me smaller. So I'm going to try something different." "What's that?" "Trusting that I can be more than one thing at a time." Adrienne was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Okay. I'll send over the contract. You sign when you're ready. No rush." "Thanks." "And Lucas?" "Yeah?" "Welcome back, boh." The next 2 weeks were controlled chaos. Lucas worked out of his apartment, files spread across every available surface, laptop running models and simulations while Ethan did homework at the kitchen table. Mrs. Chen took on extra babysitting hours without complaint, seeming to understand that something important was happening even if Lucas didn't explain it. The North Point case was exactly as messy as Reeves had described. The board member, a man named Vincent Caruso, had built an entire architecture of shell companies and liability transfers designed to look legitimate on paper but function as a personal escape hatch. When the acquisition threatened to expose him, he'd pivoted to offense, claiming North Point's leadership had known about the scheme all along and were now scapegoating him to save the deal. It was a smart play, risky, but smart. Lucas spent 70 hours across 10 days deconstructing Caruso's argument piece by piece. He traced every transaction, every email, every board meeting minute. He found the inconsistencies, the places where Caruso's timeline didn't match reality, the documents he'd falsified, the witnesses he'd claimed would support him who actually contradicted his story. By day 12, Lucas had built a case so airtight that North Point's legal team called it prosecutorial. Caruso's lawsuit would fail. Not just fail, it would destroy his credibility and open him up to potential criminal charges for fraud. Lucas sent the final package to Reeves on a Thursday evening. She called him 20 minutes later, voice thick with relief. "You saved us, again. Just doing the job. It's more than that. You gave us a future." Reeves paused. "The board wants to offer you a permanent position, chief strategic officer, whatever salary you want." Lucas leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm not looking for permanent right now. Can I at least keep you on retainer?" "Maybe. Let me get through the next few months and see where I land." "Fair enough. But Lucas?" "Yeah? If you ever need anything, references, connections, someone to vouch for you, you call me. Understand?" "I understand." After he hung up, Lucas sat in the quiet apartment and let himself feel it. Not pride exactly. Something quieter. Competence, purpose. The knowledge that he'd done something that mattered and done it well. Ethan wandered in from his bedroom, rubbing his eyes. "You done working?" "Yeah, bud, I'm done." "Good. You've been working a lot." "I know. I'm sorry." Ethan climbed onto Lucas's lap, resting his head against his father's chest. "It's okay. Mrs. Chen said you were helping people. That's important. Lucas wrapped his arms around his son, breathing in the smell of shampoo and childhood. You're more important. I know, Ethan yawned. But you can do both, right? Lucas smiled despite himself. Yeah, I think maybe I can. The following Monday, Lucas signed Adrian's contract. He did it at the kitchen table, black coffee going cold beside him, Ethan's drawings pinned to the refrigerator as a reminder of what actually mattered. The terms were everything Adrian had promised: flexible hours, project-based work, clear boundaries. Lucas read it 3 times before signing, making sure there were no hidden clauses, no traps. There weren't. He scanned the signed document and sent it to Adrian. Her response came immediately. Welcome to Coal Industries. First project briefing is Wednesday at 10 a.m. Remote attendance is fine. Lucas stared at the message, waiting to feel panic or regret or the urge to run. Instead, he just felt ready. Wednesday's briefing was professional, focused, exactly what Adrian had promised. Lucas joined via video call, listening as she walked through a potential acquisition in the renewable energy sector. The target company looked solid on paper, but Adrian wanted a deeper analysis before committing resources. Lucas, you're on point for this one, she said. 2 weeks, full breakdown. Let me know what you need. Access to their financial records, board meeting minutes from the last 3 years, and interviews with their CFO and head of operations. Done. Anything else? Yeah, I need Thursdays off. Completely off. No calls, no emails, no emergencies. Adrian didn't hesitate. Consider it standard protocol. Thursdays are yours. Lucas felt something relax in his chest. This might actually work. Over the next month, Lucas settled into a rhythm. Mornings with Ethan, school drop-off, then 4 to 6 hours of focused work while his son was in class. He'd pick Ethan up, spend the afternoon doing homework and playing in the park, make dinner, handle bedtime. Then, if needed, he'd work another 2 hours in the evening. It wasn't perfect. There were days when deadlines pressed, and Lucas had to ask Mrs. Chen for extra help. There were nights when he fell asleep at his laptop, waking up at 2 in the morning with a stiff neck and cold coffee beside him. But there were also days when he solved a problem in 3 hours that Adrian's team had been wrestling with for a week. Days when he saw a pattern no one else had noticed and redirected an entire strategy before it became a disaster. Days when he felt like himself again, sharp, capable, useful. And through it all, Ethan was there. Happy, healthy, loved, the center of everything. One evening, about 6 weeks into the new arrangement, Adrian called him after hours. Lucas almost didn't answer. It was past 8, firmly outside his availability window, but something made him pick up. This better be good, he said. It's not an emergency. I just wanted to check in. Adrian sounded tired. How are you holding up? Fine. Busy, but fine. The renewable energy analysis was exceptional, by the way. You found issues my entire team missed. That's what you pay me for. True, but I also wanted to say thank you for taking a chance on this. I know it wasn't easy. Lucas leaned against the kitchen counter, looking at Ethan's latest drawing on the fridge, a stick figure labeled Dad, standing next to a smaller stick figure labeled Me, both of them smiling under a yellow sun. It's getting easier. Good. That's good. Adrian paused. I have another project coming up, bigger than the others. I'll need you full-time for about 3 weeks. Is that doable? Lucas thought about his schedule, about Ethan's upcoming school play, and the promise he'd made to himself about not missing the important moments. When? 6 weeks from now. I can send you the preliminary details tomorrow. Send them over. I'll let you know. Fair enough. Another pause. Lucas? Yeah? I'm glad you're here. Just wanted you to know that. Thanks, Adrian. After she hung up, Lucas stood in the quiet kitchen and thought about how much had changed in 3 months. He'd gone from invisible to visible, from hiding to engaging, from convinced he had to choose between his past and his present, to realizing maybe he didn't. It wasn't perfect. He still had moments of doubt, still wondered if he was making a mistake, still worried about what would happen if the balance he'd built started to tip. But for the first time in 3 years, Lucas felt like he was moving forward instead of just surviving. And that had to count for something. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon while Lucas was reviewing financial projections for a telecommunications merger. He saw Adrienne's name on the screen and almost sent it to voicemail. He was deep in the numbers, finally seeing the pattern he'd been hunting for 3 days. But she rarely called during his work hours without reason. "Give me 1 second," he said, answering. "I'm right in the middle of something." "Take your time." Lucas scribbled down the last few notes, capturing the insight before it slipped away, then leaned back in his chair. "Okay. What's up?" "We have a situation." Adrienne's voice was tight, controlled in the way that meant she was holding back panic. "The Silverton deal. It's falling apart." Lucas sat up straighter. Silverton was the big project Adrienne had mentioned weeks ago. A massive acquisition that would position Cole Industries as a major player in the tech infrastructure space. 8 months of negotiations, $400 million, strategic implications that would echo for years. What happened? Our lead negotiator found a clause buried in their partnership agreements. If Silverton gets acquired, 3 of their largest clients have the option to terminate contracts immediately. No penalties, no notice period. Just gone. How much revenue does that represent? 40% of their annual income. If those clients walk, Silverton's value drops by half, maybe more. Adrienne exhaled hard. "My team's been working on it for 18 hours straight. They can't find a solution. The clients won't renegotiate, Silverton won't restructure, and we're 48 hours from the signing deadline." Lucas felt the familiar rush of adrenaline, the sharp focus that came when the stakes were high and the clock was ticking. "Send me everything. Partnership agreements, client contracts, negotiation history, all of it." "Lucas, it's massive. We're talking thousands of pages." "I don't care. Send it." There was a pause. "You said Tuesdays were for Ethan's piano lessons. I don't want to—" "Adrienne, send me the files." "Okay, thank you." The files arrived 10 minutes later. Lucas opened them and immediately understood why Adrienne's team was stuck. The situation was a nightmare, legally sound but strategically catastrophic. Silverton's founders had signed partnership agreements years ago when they were desperate for clients, essentially giving those clients veto power over any major corporate changes. It was terrible negotiating, but it was binding. Lucas read for 2 hours, cross-referencing contracts and looking for leverage. The clients had no obligation to stay. Silverton had no authority to force them. Cole Industries couldn't move forward without those contracts intact because the numbers simply didn't work. It looked impossible. But Lucas had learned a long time ago that impossible just meant you weren't asking the right questions yet. He picked up the phone and called Adrienne. "I need you to set up calls with all 3 clients tomorrow morning. Tell them I want to discuss their concerns about the acquisition." "They've already said no to our team." "They said no to your team's offers. They haven't heard mine yet." "What are you going to offer them?" "I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out tonight." Lucas worked until 3 in the morning, building models and running scenarios. The answer finally came to him around 2:30, exhausted and half delirious, but suddenly seeing the shape of it. The clients weren't afraid of Silverton being acquired. They were afraid of losing the personalized service and flexible terms they'd negotiated when Silverton was small and hungry. So the solution wasn't to convince them the acquisition wouldn't change anything. It was to show them how it would change things in their favor. By dawn, Lucas had a proposal drafted. He slept for 90 minutes, then woke up and refined it. When Adrienne called at 8 to confirm the meetings, Lucas was ready. The first client was a logistics company that relied on Silverton's custom software for supply chain management. Lucas spent 30 minutes on the call listening to their concerns, then laid out his proposal. Cole Industries would commit to maintaining Silverton as an independent subsidiary with full operational autonomy for 3 years. During that time, the client would get preferential pricing and first access to any new technology developments. After 3 years, they could renegotiate or walk away clean. "Why would Cole Industries agree to that?" the logistics CEO asked, suspicious. "Because stability is more valuable than control," Lucas said. "We're not trying to gut Silverton and absorb the pieces. We're trying to give them resources to grow. And that growth only works if you stay." The CEO was quiet for a moment. "Send me the terms in writing. I'll review with my board." The second client was harder, a financial services firm that had been burned by acquisitions before. Their general counsel spent 20 minutes explaining why nothing Lucas said would change their position. Lucas let him talk, then said, "What if we gave you equity?" "What?" "A stake in coal industries. Small, but meaningful. Enough that if we succeed with Silverton, you benefit directly. You'd have skin in the game and a seat at the table." The general counsel laughed. "You can't just give away equity." "I can if it's the difference between a $400 million deal succeeding or failing." "Run the numbers. I think you'll find it's worth considering." The third client was the easiest. They didn't care about terms or equity. They just wanted reassurance that the people they'd worked with at Silverton wouldn't disappear into some corporate restructuring. Lucas promised them in writing that Silverton's current leadership would remain in place for a minimum of 2 years, with bonuses tied to client retention. "And if Coal Industries breaks that promise," the client asked, "then you walk, no penalties, and we pay you $1 million for the inconvenience." By noon, all 3 clients had agreed to stay. Not enthusiastically, not without conditions, but they'd stay. The deal was salvaged. Adrienne called him immediately after the last meeting ended. "How the hell did you do that?" "I gave them what they actually wanted instead of what we thought they wanted." "The equity piece is going to be complicated, but doable." "Yeah, doable." Adrienne sounded exhausted and relieved in equal measure. "Lucas, you just saved a $400 million acquisition." "I know." "I don't think you understand. This deal was dead. My entire board was ready to walk away. You brought it back from nothing." Lucas rubbed his eyes, feeling the weight of the last 18 hours settle into his bones. "That's what you pay me for." "No, I pay you for analysis. This was something else." Adrienne paused. "I'm sending you a bonus, 200,000, non-negotiable." "Adrienne, don't argue. You earned it." She hesitated, then added, "Thank you. Seriously, I don't say that enough, but thank you." After she hung up, Lucas sat at his kitchen table and stared at the mess of papers and coffee cups surrounding him. He'd missed Ethan's piano lesson. Mrs. Chen had handled pickup and dinner, bless her, but Lucas had broken his own rule. He'd chosen work over his son. The guilt sat heavy in his stomach. When Ethan got home from school that afternoon, Lucas was waiting in the living room. His son dropped his backpack by the door and looked at him warily. "You weren't at piano," Ethan said. "I know. I'm sorry." "You promised." "I did, and I broke that promise. That's on me." Lucas patted the couch beside him. "Come here." Ethan sat, arms crossed, still upset but willing to listen. Lucas chose his words carefully. "Sometimes my work is going to interfere with things I promised. I'm going to try really hard not to let that happen, but it will happen sometimes anyway. And when it does, I need you to tell me you're upset. Don't just accept it. Make me acknowledge that I messed up." "Like now?" "Like now." Ethan was quiet for a moment, then he said, "I was really mad." "You had every right to be. Mrs. Chen said you were helping a lot of people with something important." "I was, but you're more important, and I should have figured out a way to do both." Ethan leaned against him, some of the tension leaving his small shoulders. "Did you fix the problem?" "Yeah." "Was it hard?" "Very hard." "Are you going to have to do it again?" Lucas thought about that. "Honestly, probably, but I'm going to get better at managing my time so it doesn't take away from our time." "Deal?" "Deal." Ethan pulled back, looking up at his father. "Can we still get ice cream tonight?" "Absolutely." They went to the ice cream shop 2 blocks away, got cones that were too big and too expensive, and sat on a bench watching the evening foot traffic. Ethan chattered about school and his friend Tommy's birthday party and a book he was reading about space explorers. Lucas listened, really listened, and tried to be present instead of letting his mind drift back to work. It was harder than it should have been. That night, after Ethan was asleep, Lucas sat on the couch with his laptop and started drafting an email. He wrote 3 versions before settling on one that felt right. "Adrienne, I need to set some new boundaries. No work calls or emergencies during Ethan's piano lessons, Tuesdays 4 to 5 p.m., or school events. I'll send you a calendar. If something comes up during those windows, it waits. No exceptions. I know that makes me harder to work with. If that's a problem, I understand. But I can't keep breaking promises to my son. Lucas." He sent it before he could second-guess himself. Adrian's response came 20 minutes later. Agreed. Send me the calendar and I'll block those times in my system. Also, you're not harder to work with. You're just being a good father. Don't apologize for that. Lucas read the message 3 times, then closed his laptop and went to bed. The next 6 weeks passed in a blur of controlled chaos. The Silverton deal closed successfully. Lucas consulted on 2 more acquisitions, caught a critical flaw in a partnership agreement that would have exposed coal industries to massive liability, and somehow managed to attend every one of Ethan's activities without missing a single event. It wasn't easy. There were late nights and early mornings, and moments when Lucas felt like he was being pulled in too many directions at once. But he was making it work. Barely, but work nonetheless. Then, in early December, Adrienne showed up at his apartment unannounced. Lucas opened the door to find her standing in the hallway, coat dusted with snow, holding a bottle of wine that probably cost more than his rent. "We need to talk," she said. Lucas glanced back at the living room where Ethan was building an elaborate fort out of couch cushions. "Now's not a great time." "I know, but this can't wait." Lucas stepped into the hallway, pulling the door mostly closed behind him. "What's going on?" Adrienne met his eyes, and for the first time since he'd known her, she looked uncertain. "I'm stepping down as CEO." Lucas felt the world tilt. "What?" "Not immediately, 6 months from now. But I wanted you to hear it from me first." Adrienne shifted her weight, uncharacteristically fidgety. "I've been running coal industries for 12 years. I've built it into something I'm proud of. But I'm also exhausted, and I don't want to wake up at 60 and realize I spent my entire life in boardrooms." "So what are you going to do?" "I don't know yet. Travel, maybe. Take time to figure out who I am when I'm not someone's boss." She smiled faintly. "Learn to be a person instead of a position." Lucas absorbed this, trying to process what it meant. "Who's taking over?" "That's what I wanted to talk to you about." Adrienne held his gaze. "The board wants you." Lucas actually laughed. "You're kidding." "I'm not. You've been consulting for us for 3 months. In that time, you've saved 2 major deals, identified risks no one else saw, and built a reputation as the smartest strategist in the building. The board thinks you should be my successor." "Adrienne, I can't run a company. I'm barely managing consulting work." "That's what I told them." She paused. "But they made a good point. You don't have to do it the way I did. You could build something different, more sustainable, more human." Lucas shook his head. "I have a 7-year-old son. I have boundaries I won't cross. I can't be the kind of CEO you are." "Good. Don't be." Adrienne stepped closer, voice dropping. "Be the kind of CEO who leaves at 5 to make dinner. Be the kind who shows up to school plays and takes Thursdays off and proves that you can lead a company without sacrificing everything else. Be the kind of leader I wish I'd had the courage to be." Lucas stared at her, words catching in his throat. "You're serious?" "Completely." "I need to think about this." "I know. You have 6 months. Use them." Adrienne handed him the wine. "This is for you. Good vintage. Don't save it for a special occasion. Just drink it." She started to walk away, then turned back. "One more thing." "Yeah?" "Whatever you decide, I want you to know that working with you has been the best part of the last year. You reminded me why I got into this business in the first place, so thank you." Lucas watched her disappear down the hallway, then went back inside. Ethan looked up from his fort, curious. "Who was that?" "My boss." "Is everything okay?" "Yeah, bud, everything's fine." But as Lucas set the wine on the counter and returned to help Ethan with his fort, he knew that wasn't entirely true. Everything was about to change again. And this time, he wasn't sure which direction to move. Lucas spent the next 3 months wrestling with the decision. He talked to former colleagues, read case studies of CEOs who'd tried to balance leadership with personal lives, made lists of pros and cons that never seemed to settle the question. Adrienne didn't push. She checked in occasionally, asked how he was holding up, but never pressured him to decide. She just kept running her company and preparing for her exit, calm and methodical as ever. It was Ethan who finally helped Lucas see clearly. They were at the park on a Saturday morning, Ethan on the swings while Lucas pushed. The sky was clear, the air cold but not brutal, and for a moment everything felt simple. "Dad?" Ethan said. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Are you happy?" Lucas stopped pushing. "What kind of question is that?" "I don't know. You just seem different lately, like you're thinking about something big." Ethan looked back at him, eyes serious. "Are you happy with your job?" Lucas considered lying, then decided his son deserved better. "I'm happy with parts of it. I like solving problems. I like feeling useful. But I also miss having more time with you." "Would being the boss give you more time or less time?" "Probably less. At least at first." "Then why would you do it?" It was such a simple question. And sitting there in the park, watching his son wait for an answer, Lucas realized he didn't have a good one. He'd been so focused on whether he could do the job that he'd forgotten to ask whether he should. "You know what?" Lucas said. "I don't think I would." Ethan grinned. "Good, because I like you the way you are." That night, Lucas called Adrienne. "I'm saying no," he told her. "To the CEO position. I appreciate the offer, but it's not the right fit." "Can I ask why?" "Because I've spent the last 3 years learning to prioritize what actually matters. And being CEO would undo all of that. I'd be back to sacrificing my life for my career, and I'm not willing to do that anymore." Adrienne was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I respect that. More than you know. I'll keep consulting, though, if you want me." "Of course I want you. You're the best strategist I've ever worked with." She paused. "For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice." "Yeah?" "Yeah. You know who you are, Lucas. That's rarer than you think." The months that followed were quieter, more stable. Lucas continued consulting for coal industries, taking projects that interested him and turning down ones that didn't. He built a reputation as someone who could solve impossible problems, but who also had boundaries you didn't cross. Some clients respected it. Others didn't and went elsewhere. Lucas didn't lose sleep over it. Adrienne stepped down as CEO in June, handing the reins to an internal candidate who'd been with the company for a decade. She threw a small farewell party, intimate, carefully curated, nothing like the massive corporate events Lucas remembered from his old life. He brought Ethan, who spent most of the evening asking Adrienne questions about running a company and eating more cake than was probably advisable. "Your son's sharp," Adrienne said at one point, watching Ethan interrogate one of the board members about investment strategy. "He gets it from his mother," Lucas said. "Does he ever ask about her?" "Sometimes. I tell him what I can, that she loved him, that she would have been proud of who he's becoming. That's all I've got." Adrienne nodded. "It's enough." As the party wound down, Adrienne pulled Lucas aside. "I'm leaving town for a while. Doing the whole find yourself thing that everyone says you should do when you burn out spectacularly." "Where are you going?" "South America, maybe. Europe. Wherever feels right." She smiled. "No plan, no agenda, just existing for a while." "That sounds terrifying." "It is, but I think I need terrifying right now." Adrienne paused. "I wanted to thank you for everything. You helped me remember that there's more to life than winning. I think you helped me remember the same thing. Then we're even." She hugged him, brief and slightly awkward because neither of them were huggers, then turned to say goodbye to the other guests. Lucas watched her work the room one last time, this woman who'd barged into his life and refused to let him hide, and felt grateful in a way he couldn't quite articulate. A month later, Lucas got a postcard from Argentina. No return address, just a picture of mountains and a single line of text. "Still figuring it out. Thanks for showing me it's possible." Lucas pinned it to the refrigerator next to Ethan's drawings. 2 years passed. Lucas turned 35. Ethan turned 9. They moved to a bigger apartment, 2 bedrooms, actual windows that let in light, a neighborhood with decent schools, and a park that didn't have broken glass in the sandbox. Lucas kept consulting, kept setting boundaries, kept showing up for his son in all the ways that mattered. The industry had fully absorbed his return by then. He got offers regularly, full-time positions, partnerships, board seats. He turned them all down, not because he was afraid, but because he'd built something that worked and he wasn't interested in breaking it. On a Thursday in October, Lucas got a message from an unknown number. "Coffee? Same place as before." Tomorrow at 9 if you're free. He knew immediately who it was. Adrienne walked into the coffee shop looking different than Lucas remembered. Lighter, somehow. Less polished. She wore jeans and a sweater that looked comfortable rather than expensive, and her hair was longer, pulled back in a casual ponytail. "You look good," Lucas said as she sat down. "I feel good. Turns out not working 80 hours a week does wonders for your health." She ordered tea instead of coffee, which was new. "How's Ethan?" "Good. Growing too fast. Asking questions I don't know how to answer." "Like what?" "Last week he asked me if I was lonely." Adrienne raised an eyebrow. "What did you tell him?" "That sometimes I am. But lonely's not the same as alone, and I'd rather be alone and honest than partnered and pretending." "That's pretty wise for someone who serves wine for a living." Lucas smiled. "I haven't worked at Marchand's in 2 years." "I know. I've been keeping tabs." Adrienne wrapped her hands around her mug. "I'm back. Not permanently, but for a while. And I wanted to see if you'd be interested in a project." "What kind of project?" "I'm starting a non-profit. Small scale, focused on helping people who've been wrongfully terminated rebuild their careers, providing legal support, job placement, financial assistance during the transition. The kind of help I wish had existed for me. And for you." Lucas leaned back, processing. "That's ambitious." "It is. And I need someone who understands what it's like to be on the other side of that experience. Someone who can look at a case and figure out what actually happened versus what the official story says." She met his eyes. "I need you." "As what?" "Strategic director. Part-time, flexible hours, mission-driven work. We'd be helping people who have nowhere else to turn, people like we used to be." Lucas thought about it, about the 3 years he'd spent buried under the weight of a lie, watching his life fall apart while everyone looked away. About the people who were living that nightmare right now, without resources or connections or anyone willing to believe them. "What's the pay?" "Nonprofit salary, meaning terrible, but meaningful." "And the hours?" "Whatever you can give. 10 hours a week, 20, 30. Your choice." Lucas smiled. "When do we start?" The nonprofit launched 6 months later. They called it Second Shift, a name Adrienne insisted on because it honored people rebuilding their lives on their own terms. Lucas worked 20 hours a week, reviewing cases and helping construct strategies for wrongful termination lawsuits. It was harder than corporate consulting in some ways, more emotionally draining, but also more satisfying. Every case they won felt personal. Ethan adjusted to his father's new schedule with the resilience of a kid who'd learned early that life didn't follow neat patterns. He asked questions about what Lucas was working on, why it mattered, whether they were actually helping people. Lucas answered honestly, never talking down to his son, never pretending the world was simpler than it was. One evening, while they were making dinner together, Ethan said, "I'm proud of you, Dad." Lucas looked up from the cutting board. "For what?" "For helping people who got hurt. And for still being here for me." Lucas set down the knife and pulled his son into a hug. "I'm proud of you too, bud." "For what?" "I'm just a kid." "For being smart and kind and for asking the questions that matter. That's not easy." Ethan hugged him back, skinny arms wrapped tight around Lucas's waist, and for a moment everything else fell away. The work, the decisions, the constant balancing act, none of it mattered as much as this. Being here, being present, being enough. 3 years after that conversation in the coffee shop, Lucas stood in a conference room with Adrienne and their small team, reviewing the numbers. Second Shift had helped 43 people rebuild their careers. They'd won 18 lawsuits, settled another 12, and provided financial support to families who would have otherwise lost everything. It wasn't a massive number. It wasn't going to change the world overnight, but it was 43 people who had their dignity back. 43 families who didn't have to choose between fighting for justice and keeping the lights on. "We should celebrate," Adrienne said, closing her laptop. "Dinner, somewhere nice, my treat." "I can't tonight. Ethan's got a thing at school." "Tomorrow then." "Tomorrow works." They went to a quiet restaurant, nothing fancy, and talked about the cases they were working on and the ones they'd just closed. Somewhere between the appetizer and the main course, the conversation shifted. "Can I ask you something?" Adrienne said. "Sure." "Do you ever regret it, turning down the CEO position?" Lucas thought about it. "No. I made the right choice for me. Maybe it would have been different if I didn't have Ethan, but I do. And being his father is more important than running a company. Even if you could have done both? I don't think I could have. Not the way I wanted to. Lucas paused. What about you? Do you regret stepping down? Not even a little bit. Best decision I ever made. Adrian smiled. Turns out there's a whole world outside boardrooms. Who knew? They finished dinner and walked outside into the cool evening air. The city was alive around them, people heading to shows, grabbing late dinners, living their small, important lives. Lucas thought about how far he'd come from that night in the alley behind Marchand's, when Adrian had offered him everything and he'd said no. He'd said no because he was afraid, because he thought staying small was the same as staying safe. But over time, he'd learned the difference between hiding and choosing, between running from the past and building toward a future, between letting the world define him and defining himself. Thank you, Lucas said. Adrian looked at him. For what? For not giving up on me, even when I gave up on myself. You never gave up, Lucas. You just needed time to figure out what you were fighting for. They stood there for a moment, two people who'd found their way back from different kinds of breaking, and then Adrian said, I should get going. Early meeting tomorrow. Yeah, me too. But neither of them moved. Finally, Adrian said, I know we've never talked about this, but I want you to know that I see you, not as an employee or a consultant or a partner, just as a person. And I think you're remarkable. Lucas felt something shift in his chest. Adrian, you don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know. She started to walk away and Lucas almost let her, almost fell back into the pattern of keeping people at arm's length, of never letting anyone get too close. But then he thought about everything he'd learned over the past 5 years, about how life was short and uncertain and full of moments you only got once. Wait, he said. Adrian turned back. I see you too, and I don't know what that means or where it goes, but I'd like to find out. Adrian smiled, genuine and unguarded in a way Lucas had rarely seen. Yeah? Yeah. Okay then. She stepped closer. Let's find out together. 6 months later, Lucas and Ethan moved into a house with a backyard. It wasn't huge, wasn't fancy, but it had space for a garden and a swing set and Sunday morning pancakes on the back porch. Adrienne had her own place across town because neither of them was ready to merge their lives completely, but she spent weekends there more often than not. Ethan liked her, not in the forced, trying too hard way some kids adapted to their parents' partners, but genuinely. She asked him real questions and listened to his answers. She didn't try to be his mother, didn't overstep, just existed in their lives in a way that felt natural rather than intrusive. One Sunday morning, while Ethan was in the backyard building something elaborate with sticks and rope, Adrienne and Lucas sat on the porch with coffee. This is nice, Adrienne said. It is. I never thought I'd have this, the quiet domesticity thing. Is it what you expected? Better, actually. Less boring than I feared. She glanced at him. You? I stopped expecting things a long time ago. Now I just try to be grateful for what shows up. That's a good philosophy. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Ethan work on his project with the intense focus only children seemed capable of. Lucas thought about the life he'd built. Imperfect, complicated, nothing like what he'd planned, but somehow better for it. He thought about the version of himself who'd stood in that alley 3 years ago, terrified and furious, and convinced the world was closing in. That man had believed the only way to survive was to stay invisible, to ask for nothing, to accept that safety meant being small. But he'd been wrong. Safety didn't come from hiding. It came from knowing who you were and building a life that honored that knowledge. It came from setting boundaries and keeping promises and showing up for the people who mattered. It came from being brave enough to let people see you, even when visibility felt dangerous. Lucas had learned that the hard way. But he'd learned it. And now, sitting on a porch with coffee and sunlight and a woman who saw him clearly, he finally understood what it meant to be whole. Not perfect, not unmarked by the past, just whole in the way that counted. Present, honest, alive in all the small moments that made up a life worth living. Ethan ran up to the porch, breathless and excited. Dad, come see what I built. Lucas set down his coffee and stood. "Lead the way, bud." As he followed his son into the backyard, Adrian trailing behind them, Lucas felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not happiness, exactly. Something quieter. Something that felt like peace. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. The end wasn't dramatic. There were no grand gestures, no sweeping declarations, no moments where everything suddenly made sense. Just three people building a life together, messy and imperfect and real. Lucas kept working with second shift, kept consulting part-time, kept being a father first and everything else second. Adrienne found her rhythm between the nonprofit and her own projects, finally learning to exist outside the confines of corporate achievement. Ethan grew up with two adults who showed him that strength wasn't about never breaking. It was about how you put yourself back together afterward. Years later, when Ethan was grown and starting his own journey, he'd ask Lucas what lesson he'd learned from everything that happened. Lucas would think about it for a long time before answering. "I learned that the world will try to tell you who you are," he'd say, "and most of the time the world is wrong. So you have to figure out who you actually are. Not who you were, not who you think you should be, just who you are right now, and build from there. Everything else is just noise." Ethan would nod, absorbing this, and then he'd ask, "Was it worth it? All of it?" Lucas would look at the life he'd built, the mistakes and the victories, the losses and the gains, the moments of doubt and the moments of clarity, and he'd smile. Every single piece. Because that was the truth. Not the sanitized version, not the story you told to make yourself sound better, but the actual, complicated truth. The journey from broken to whole was never clean. It was messy and painful and full of moments where you wanted to quit. But somewhere along the way, if you were lucky and stubborn and willing to keep showing up, you found something worth fighting for. And that made all the difference.